No?
Yeah, we hear you. Thank you.
We're ready to go.
Okay, we will call this meeting of the Board of Finance to order. First, I'll do a roll call of the Board of Finance members. Myself, Tim O'Brien, and Glenn Frischman are here in the Police Department meeting room. I should have stated that it is 7:03 p.m. on Thursday, the 18th of March. Mike Farbach, are you on?
Here. We get it done.
Lynn Young, are you on?
Here.
Deb Norman?
Here.
Bob Stachin?
Here.
And Dave Motherway.
Here.
Jim Sullivan, are you on?
Present.
And is Jill Senior here?
Yep, I'm here.
Great. I would remind everyone, if you're not talking, to please mute your mics because we do pick up a lot of extra audio here, and we want to make sure whoever we're talking to or whichever board member is talking, we can hear. I'd remind everyone also, if you are talking, to please identify yourself first so that we can make sure the minutes are accurately reflected. First order on the agenda is new business, is the budget deliberations, so we will continue our deliberations. The first thing I'd like to do is make one comment reminding everyone who is involved here that the Board of Finance is evaluating the needs of the town here, and we do that based on the input from the directors and heads of the departments in town. Those people's input is the important driver that talks to us about what we are trying to do. Outside efforts and supports are great to have, but really the first thing we go to and we use is the department heads' requests and needs and demonstrations. I know that there was an article in the paper today and it was misconstrued about how the Board of Finance operates. We will continue to, as we always have, operate based on the needs of the community. Now, in discussions with the first selectman, she has gotten some clarification from CCM about the use of the current COVID funds that we are receiving, the America Cares Act funds. So given the current information we have, Jim, can you go to the SIP line, please?
I'm sorry, Tip, you want to go to the SIP schedule or the SIP line in the budget summary?
SIP schedule. SIP schedule, please.
Okay.
Here we are. And we're going to go to line 55, the Town Hall HVAC improvements.
Okay.
And we'll take that 190 down to $1, please.
Done.
And then line 56, the Human Services HVAC replacement. Can you take that down to $1, please?
Done.
Okay, both of those will be funded through the America Cares Act money that we have coming in, so that will take that out of the operating budget. Then I received a request from Peter Anderson from the schools. Could you go to their SIP line 155 for the 2 trucks?
That's for $65,000, is that correct?
Correct. Can you move that to $33,000?
33,000. Okay. Done.
Okay, then I gotta, hang on, I gotta find it. Just had it and I lost it. Where's the district office?
This computer you're looking at, line 128?
No. I need the building management system. There it is, line 146.
Tim, what's the amount? Because I'm working off of a revised schedule
Okay.
that I have that you guys don't have. So if you just tell me what the,
It was 157.7 and it was brought down to $1. Peter, are you on the line? Peter?
Yeah, I'm here. Yes.
Okay. What did you need half of that line?
Yes, the half of it will at least, we have 2 buildings that need to have the building management upgraded. The district office is in desperate need, so I don't have to be buying parts off eBay anymore.
Okay, so that should go to 78.8.
okay, 78,850 is half, is 50%.
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Those are the immediate changes that I had. Do any board members have any? Let's look at the operating budget section now, which we did not go into as deeply. And what I'd probably like to do is just not go line by line, but if any board members have input of questions or that they would like answered, unless Mike Fauerbach, actually, before we do that, Mike Fauerbach, do you want to ask Chris any questions on the computers for the public schools from the SIP budget?
Yeah, no, thanks, Tim. It's Mike here. So I appreciate Chris. You mentioned the prioritization as well as the details on that third priority. Trying to pull this up as I speak, but I do remember he broke it down into 3 groupings, and I guess if he's on, it would be helpful to maybe get a bit of commentary on that third priority, whether that really is something that you know, we have some flexibility on, we can maybe defer, or if you're really considering all 3 of those elements, you know, what we would typically call AA priorities. But is Chris on?
Yes, he is. Is he unmuted? Yes.
No, Dave Motherway had looked at that also. I have questions.
He's still muted? Okay.
So,
Roger, can you text him, and why don't we go back through we'll start at the operating.
If we're gonna do, once we get him, because Dave Motherway, I think.
No, I understand. I'd come back to it. I'm not, but if, I don't want to sit here with dead time waiting to try and get microphones working.
Mr. Chairman, this is Bob Stachin. Just quickly, looking at the middle school AC upgrades at 135, did we reference that? I thought there was some discussions on that, or is that staying for purposes of this evening?
Where are you, Bob? I couldn't hear you.
I'm at line 135, the middle school AC, the 1.9. I thought that.
Yeah, for now, that is staying at the $1 as we figure out what the CARES Act will and won't let the school and the town pay for. So for right now, we're going to leave that and look at a long-term plan to make sure we're not doing something that would be contrary to the rest of the building there, or that would be negated very quickly. So for now, we'll be leaving that as is.
At $1.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm sorry if we had done that and I missed it.
No problem. Not a problem.
It's just a big number.
Yep. It is.
Chris just got back. He's on 2 meetings currently.
Okay. So let's go to operating then.
Okay, operating budget. Page 23, lines 2 and 3.
You might have to speak up so everyone can hear.
But can you just go by page? We don't have to go by line items, Tim, but can we just go by page so we're not jumping around like crazy?
Yeah, that's what Glenn's trying to do. Was on
In the version 8, page 23.
Yeah.
Which department?
3.
which department?
This is Department for Selectmen. Office of Selectmen.
Yep.
Yeah, we had reduced those two lines each by $10,000. And the attribution of that money is yet to be determined. I think we should do some type of comparability study before we attribute those lines anywhere but the general fund, because as you remember, when Colonel Simmons was selected, he proposed this because he said he didn't need the money. But I think we may be undervaluing the position of first selectman.
And also remind people from our meeting on Tuesday, we did do an initial study of this, and my findings have found most towns pay their other select people between $2,000 and $4,000 stipend. So
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not.
We're not questioning those two. We're questioning the salary of the first selectman,
Yeah,
which was lowered by former Selectman Simmons to fund the other two hires. So I think what Mr. Frischman is saying is we're gonna ask Patty to take a look at the first selectman's salary and do a comparables and see from that 20 what should the first selectman's salary be so that we are competitive comparably, because that 20 came directly out of that a couple of years ago.
That's right. And while we're on the same page, line 20, Mystic River Park, the reason for the rather significant increase was due to COVID? Was that the case?
Is Ben Tansky on the line? He's the representative from the Mystic River Park. If he's not, I can speak to it. But...
Yeah, he called me too.
Sorry, Lynn, go ahead.
He called me too. It is a COVID-related increase. They had a lot more cleaning that they had to do in order for the restrooms to be usable.
Okay.
Yeah, the notes I have here is that there was a heavy use of the park this summer, which led to more trash haul out and additional bathrooms. Does anyone else have anything in the first selectman's part?
Wait a minute, I did someplace. I think it was page 7. Hang on. Yeah. So the sewer, the Water Pollution Control Agency, I'll probably get tossed off the board, but why is it up another 50 grand this year? I don't remember that.
Okay, so I was just trying to stay within the first selectman part.
Oh, what am I? Well, first selectman. Oh, wait a minute. So I got what you're saying. Okay.
Yep, operating, but just the first selectman tab
Okay.
for that. So
Trying to do this.
Yep, I got you. Administrative services, is there anything there?
Yeah, there's just page 33.
What line item are you?
That is line 62. That's a new request. And if we're going to stick our toes in the water, I'd rather do it for 5,000 rather than 7,500.
So are all the Board of Finance members on the same page? It's line 62 under the Administrative Services tab. Mr. Frischman is suggesting 5,000. The department request was 7,500.
Ms. Mike, I guess my question there is, was there a particular program in mind, series of programs that required that amount and they just can't do it for 5,000?
You may need to come up, I'm not sure.
Hopefully you can hear me. So we've been looking at diversity, equity, inclusion training this past year. And I would say most of the programs we've been looking at, even for 3-hour programs, roughly are 2,000 or 2,500. We've been able to send some people to a program through UConn. It's been a little less expensive, but the 7,500 was really to try to get just maybe even 3 training programs throughout the year, perhaps some outreach programs in the community. $5,000 we'll be able to do 1 or 2 things in 1 or 2 programs. So if that's the decision that we can, do that. We were just trying to, get a start, since I think we're a little behind other municipalities in this area.
How do members feel?
This is Bob Stachin. I would support funding that at the amount requested. I think it's an important issue. And I think the training that they're undertaking is appropriate. It's not a big number. It's what they asked for. So I would support keeping it at the 7,500 to allow them to conduct the programs they're seeking.
How do members feel?
This is Bob Stachin. I would support funding that at the amount requested. I think it's an important issue. And I think the training that they're undertaking is appropriate. It's not a big number. It's what they asked for. So I would support keeping it at the 7,500 to allow them to conduct the programs they're seeking.
This is Lynn, Tim. Having just taken that class, though, I do hope we find something that is a little more meaningful.
Could you understand?
Yes, I could, only because that was one of the classes. So,
You took.
yeah, I took it too. How do other members feel?
It's Deb Norman. Do we know how much we've spent so far? Like, is it, how many boards are we trying to cover? Like, I don't know the numbers about how much outreach.
So far this year, we've sent, I would say, most of the department heads, probably 14 board and commission members, but we were able to get some programs through UConn, which they just happen to offer a good cost price for municipalities. So this year, I think so far we've probably spent $3,000, but that's the only money we had in the budget, so there was no more for me to spend.
Okay, thank you. I recommend keeping it at its current price.
Yeah, it's Mike. I mean, $2,500. Yeah, I guess I would trust Patty's judgment on this and just leave it the way it is.
Okay. Sense is that we will leave. Dave, what do you think? I want to make sure I get everybody.
What I would say is the reason I support the increase is to actually support Lynn's comment of finding a training program that has some more meat on the bones.
Okay, so the sense we get is that will remain at the 7,500. Okay.
How about,
Go ahead.
You call the section.
Are you still, anything else?
I've got questions on page 61, line 10. I want to know what is included in hardware.
What section?
Page 61, line 10. That's the.
What department?
What department are you in?
On the page, I think it is going to be highway department.
Okay, then let me go through the other ones first. Figure out which department that is, and
Department of Public Works.
Yes.
Okay. Assessment, I don't think there was anything anyone had any questions on, but I just want to make sure. No? Okay. Finance operating budget, anyone has any questions on or comments on that? None?
Hey, Tim, I just have a request. It's Lynn. I'm trying to do this on an iPad because that's the latest version. And can you just say the page number when you're doing this that you're at? It's easier to find it instead of scrolling all over the place.
Yeah, let me pull it up because I have the paper copies I'm using have the different page numbers. Let me just pull it up here in a second. There's version 8. Okay.
Tim, it's Mike. Just while you're doing that, maybe I can ask a question of Jim on the finance department. So I think it's page 45. It's the page I believe we're on in the latest version.
Correct. That's actually what I was looking for. Go ahead, Mike. Yep.
So Jim, line 18 is financial, technical, professional services.
Mm-hmm.
My note that I'd written down from the prior discussion on that was that you were maybe still trying to refine the estimate there.
We discussed that on Tuesday. That whole 35,000 is coming out. If you go back a few meetings, we discussed possibly leaving like 18.5 in there to go to the ASP system for our Munis GL system. What we discussed on Tuesday was the 35,000 in the current year's budget hasn't been touched, so I'm going to take the money from that, encumber that, and spend it in the following year, so the 35,000 request for 21-22 can go away.
Yep. Sorry. Right. You're right. Sorry. My version control issue. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on page 45 to 47? Finance Department. Okay. Debt services is next. There's not really any questions there.
Well,
Planning office.
Tim, if I may?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
There was the question of whether you want to knock down the debts, well, whether you want to incorporate the possible refunding, we'll say that we may do this spring. There's probably if we do go forward, if the numbers remain positive, we have the opportunity to refund some current existing bonds, decrease our debt service for 21, 22. And again, the larger issue is, how do you want to structure? Do you want to take as much savings as you can up front, or do you want to have the savings, spread out equally over the remaining term of the existing bonds, which is 14 years? So the two versions I sent you, which will at a 1.5% refinance rate. If you take the savings up front, we could potentially eliminate $650,000 or so from our debt service in 21, 25. Or if you take version 2, you could eliminate, I think, approximately 65,000 or so. So I don't know if it's because that numbers aren't carved in stone. If you don't want to move on that tonight, I just want to put that out there.
Well, what I was thinking we would do, Jim, is get through this budget, because the cost savings would only be 21, 22 to start with. It would not be the current budget that we're talking about. So if we could iron out the current budget with the changes we need to make there, then give you a sense of looking at this debt service and what, get into some meat and potatoes on that. Because then we could alleviate, if we get through the budget, then everyone who is not involved in the Board of Finance can go about their day.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yep.
Nope, that's okay.
Can I just,
But
this is Bob Stachin, if I could just, while we're talking about it, if I could ask for clarification. Jim, are you saying the two estimates that you sent us, specifically looking at the first one, that's potential savings on debt service for this budget year?
When I say this budget year, the budget we're talking about tonight, 21, 22.
If we went with the front load option, that would be 677,000 savings for this year's budget.
Rates have backed up. I doubt that's still true, Jim.
Right, but that's
that was 3 weeks ago. Yes, but that was at a projected rate of 1.5, and granted, we know rates are going up. It's going to change come mid-April or early.
Sure. My only question, Jim, is timing, and I wasn't sure whether it was for this fiscal year or for next fiscal year, but from what you're saying, if there were savings, it would be applied to this fiscal year.
When you say this fiscal year, the budget we're talking about.
The budget we're talking about now, correct.
21, 22.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. All right, next is Planning Department, pages 54 to 55. Any questions or comments on that?
I'm here if you have any questions.
Like, no questions. All right, next is Public Works, page 61 through 62. Mr. Frischman, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I had a question on line 10, which is hardware. I just want to know what's in it. $19,000.
Tom Curioso will respond to that.
Hi, it would be typical items, if you could think of something like the Cash Home Center. A lot of items we buy there. We buy screws, we buy tape measures, we buy small hand tools. Some of the larger ticket items in that budget line are something like I'm looking at the current budget now. We have a 14-inch diamond blade that we use for the demolition saw on the road saws. And an item like that is $967. So some of the higher price stuff like that adds up quickly. Obviously, a tape measure is $14, but we have some other things in there like that add up quickly. But it would be all small stuff, small hand tools, things we need to, if we build custom forms to do concrete work or sidewalk repairs. other things we would do like that.
Would that include the soot filters on the diesels?
I wish it did, but it doesn't.
Okay. I just want to know what it was.
Okay.
Line 17, did we take that down?
We had not.
Perhaps we could take it down. And keep it the same as last year. You know, the department question originally was 100.
So, Board of Finance members, no, we're on page 61, line 17, sidewalk repairs. What are you suggesting, Mr. Frischman? 100? Mr. Frischman is suggesting we take that down to the department request of $100,000.
I support.
Who was that?
That's Lynn.
Okay, what did you say, Lynn?
I said I support that.
So it's Mike here. Just to, I remember on Tuesday, I did ask Barbara if she could take a closer look at all the line items in the highway department. Just again, knowing that the highway department's got a pretty high growth rate. So I don't know. I'd be curious to hear her comments on where she thinks she might be able to see, but I certainly can appreciate that this might be one of the lines where we would need to do some squeezing. So I don't know. Barbara, is there another line besides this one where you feel that there's an opportunity?
Hi, Barbara McCrell, and actually, yesterday I went through the budget and I brought it down to 2%. And to do that, I basically had to cut everything to a zero increase. So I reviewed it with the first selectman, and we recommended to just stay with where we're at. I put $100,000. I think it's a significant increase, and it's a good start for where we're at this year financially.
Okay, thanks, Barbara.
So what do you mean you took it down 2%? What item should we be looking at here?
Well, I basically reduced. The request, I think, from the Board of Finance was to have my budget be at 2%. So I went and I played around with it on Excel, and the only way for me to get it down to 2% would be for me to take every increase that I asked for and zero it down to allow me to get it down to 2%. I guess the things that were most important to us is if we're not going to get the equipment replaced, we would actually request that maybe we get another $10,000 added to the equipment repair, the fleet maintenance line item. And was there another item that we were looking at? We would like for another 5,000 with the field maintenance, and we'd like to keep that 5,000 with the field maintenance because we think that part is also important. Is there anything else, Tom? And I think actually those were the only line items that we kept. Actually, we increased fleet maintenance and we maintained the line item for field maintenance, and we had to take everything down to a zero increase. And the other thing I wanted to mention too is there was discussion 2 days ago about the snow removal line item budget, and that labor line item has remained flat throughout the last 6 years that I've been preparing the budget. And really, whatever they were given in salary increase that year, that would have been a decrease in that line item because I didn't increase the wage line item under the snow removal. So in reality, that line item's gone down a minimum of 2% every year. If that makes sense.
Lynn, just to clarify, I think I see another confused face on the screen. What Barbara's saying is after, I think Mike Sarabach requested to take a closer look, she did go through and then we sat and talked, and in all honesty, I especially felt we put together a budget on the operating side, bless you, that was reflective of the needs, and that's what we're presenting. So again, if you want to go through and talk line by line on certain ones, but this request to go in and just hit a 2% increase for this department just really isn't feasible. It's going to impact services.
No, Danielle, I thought Barbara said she reduced it by 2%. No, I understand what you said. Okay.
Tried, and I.
Yeah. So this is Mike, and maybe just to clarify, and I apologize if you guys misinterpreted on Tuesday. I wasn't suggesting that I find a way to get a 2%. I guess what I was suggesting is that, you know, the current budget presented was at 10% growth, and that just seemed particularly high relative to some of the other departments. You know, if we had to start squeezing somewhere, you know, where would Barbara go first? But I wasn't suggesting that. Tell me how you get the idea. 2%.
And I think it just to reflect that there's just certain things in this part of the budget that have always been underfunded or not at all. So we added in bridge maintenance, we increased sidewalk repairs, the drainage, a number of things that just we're not even hitting a good percentage of what is around town, and we're just leaving these problems till tomorrow.
I mean, the bridge maintenance line item, we had $1,000 in there. And these days, you can't even paint the bridge for $1,000 because, you know, we have to put special measures in to scrape the paint so that it doesn't fall in the river or the stream, or, you know, whatever, wherever we're doing the work. And
yeah, I guess, you know, again, for me, Barbara, it comes down, like, if we needed to find 50,000, which is kind of what we're talking about right now.
yeah.
Is the sidewalk line the best place to take the 50,000, or would you take it somewhere else? Yeah, I'm not suggesting we go zeroing everything out. It was just, where's the first line you would go to find, you know, 25, 50,000, yeah.
And I would say that the sidewalk line item would have the least impact on the operations of the highway department.
Then I would support this proposal.
I would support the reduction of the sidewalk line, but again, my understanding, and Mr. Chairman, you can correct me, today, right now, we're deliberating on this version 8 as it stands, not in regards to any reduction that Barbara talked about, correct?
You are correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
and at this point, at this point, I support the budget, that budget as presented, subject to Mr. Frischman's reduction of the sidewalk line, and then I would revisit those further reductions after maybe we get a final tally from Mr. Sullivan. Thank you.
I think it is, Tim, it's Mike again, sorry. I think it is important to note, just for the record too, that we are talking about sidewalk repairs and operating expenses. There's substantial investment in sidewalks in capital budget, you know, for the year, and that is being preserved. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, this is completely absent of the new sidewalks that's in the capital. How do other members feel about taking the 150 down to 100 for the line 17?
I'm in agreement, but I do worry about this budget of being I don't want to push it too much. Barbara's been really good about explaining what's coming down the pike at us, and I'm a little nervous about pushing it, you know, squeezing it too much, but it sounds like if that's just that line, fine by me.
Okay, sounds like David.
Mr. Chairman, this is Dave Motherway. I support it. Just one question, Barbara, and I know you've been asked this multiple times, and I appreciate you repeating it for my bad memory. Is you provided a number on the cost you expected if you did all of the access improvements to the sidewalks at one point in the budget. Do you happen to have that?
I do. 1 minute.
And I recall you talking specifically about the access improvement element.
So we're talking about accessible ramps?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we have a backlog of 1.69 million of accessible ramp compliance.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. So the $50,000 isn't going to cover that, so I support it.
Okay. Jim, can you, on page 61 of the Highway Department, take line 17 from $150,000 to $100,000, please? Jim, you're muted. Can you confirm that to me, please?
Sorry about that. Yes, I've made that adjustment. Reduced line
Great.
17 by $50,000.
Great, thank you, Jim.
Okay, I have a question for Director McCrell. Page 61, line 29, bridge maintenance. Is that the design for or identification of potential repairs, or is that trying to fix an already identified repair?
Am I, okay. I'll go over it briefly, and then I'm going to let Chris talk about it a little bit. That's a fund basically for non-structural repair, sidewalks, railings, things that don't things that are not related to the structural integrity of the bridge. We think those are projects that they'll still be projects that require design work. Most of them will need to be bid out. And our goal, and actually I'm going to pass it over to Chris, who has much more of the background on it here.
Good evening, Chris Greenlaw, Town Engineer. So the distinction between the operation and maintenance account would be for those non-structural items, as Director McCrell mentioned. As we get reports from DOT, when they do inspections of other areas, they'll send us letters and they'll differentiate between large structural repairs and repairs such as the non-structural. So this is an operations and maintenance account to cover the sidewalks, curbing. I believe in Director's presentation, Director McCrell's presentation 2 meetings ago, if you remember Alpha Avenue Bridge, there was a series of lights that have fallen off. And those lights, each one of those alone is roughly $4,100. So you can imagine that under the operation and maintenance account, those monies could be spent quickly because we want to be proactive and replace those lights rather than reactive, obviously for public safety. So that's just an example of what that account, what that monies would be utilized for.
Okay, so you're going to replace those lights?
Currently, yes. Currently 2 of them, but that's an example of how would we continue to use that account funding. Sidewalks, curbing, non-structural items, the metal beam rail, fences, on top of the parapet walls, items of that sort, non-structural.
Just wanted to refresh my memory, make sure I understood. Thank you.
Hey, Tom, it's Lynn. How come the town would be doing that bridge and not the borough?
Actually, half of that town is the borough, and half of that bridge is the borough, and half of the bridge is the town. And so actually, in replacing those lights, I've already talked to Jeff Callahan, and he's going to be paying for half of them.
Thank you.
Other questions from board members for the Highway Department section?
I just have one, Barbara. How come the payroll's up so high? The 3.57 or whatever it was.
Oh, it's
so there's a reason.
We actually looked at in the past I've had vacant positions, and when I've had people coming in on overtime, the vacancies have paid for the overtime. This year I've been fully staffed, and so what I did is I went and I did a 12-month look back on the overtime that we put in, and through that I determined that more overtime was required. The majority of the overtime that we put in is emergency response with the police. And then the other overtime that we put in this last year was we did traffic control for paving. And so if the paving extended past their workday that ends at 3 o'clock, then we kept our team there that was doing the traffic control to continue with that work.
I assume that's cheaper than having either the police or whoever's doing the paving.
It's significantly cheaper than the police by many times.
Okay.
And actually, we used them almost on every paving project this year, and it worked out very well because when we pull in flaggers, I think cost-wise, I haven't done a comparison, but I think cost-wise, I would have to say it's equal or less. And the benefit of using our team is that they know the roads and they're able to divert the traffic. And you've got a group that goes out there that knows each other. They communicate very well, and we've actually this year had very few traffic issues with moving around cars around the paving work.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on Public Works, Board of Finance members?
Yeah, and I'm sure this was covered specifically, but 116% increase in the unleaded gasoline. 114% increase
And-
year over year. I just wanted to understand that.
And I'll let Tom respond to that.
Over the last few years, we've been slowly transitioning the smaller fleet, the Mason dump style trucks and pickup trucks, and putting gasoline engines in those. The reason that we've gone that way is that we have a lot of extra costs. You heard Mr. Fisher talk about minutes ago with the particulate filters on the diesel engines. It almost becomes cost prohibitive to put one of these diesel engines in a smaller vehicle. So the larger trucks we're going to have stuck with diesels until the battery technology comes around, when they'll be electric at some point. So that's the short answer on why the consumption of unleaded.
Okay, had I looked one line lower, Tom, I would have seen the offset. Thank you for pointing that out.
You're welcome.
Other questions, board members? No. All right, we'll move forward to solid waste, page 66. Any questions there? None, okay. Move forward to page 70, engineering department. Any questions there? No. Facilities maintenance, under Public Works, page 75 to 76. Any questions there? No. Okay. Building official, page 79. Any questions there? Okay. WPCA, page 83. Any questions there?
I'm sure I'm going to have one in a second, as soon as I find it.
Page 83, Lynn.
Yeah, I got it. Oh, no, I'm still looking for where the, never mind. Okay, I got it.
Lynn, you're looking at line 12.
No, I wasn't looking at that. I was trying to figure out what was in the, I've just reconciled it to the, the beginning of the book. It's fine.
Well, it's Mike. I do have a question on line 12, which is the share of the operating fees. So that's scheduled, or that's presented in the budget as an increase of $50,000 from $250,000 in the current fiscal year up to $300,000. And for those of us who've been on the board for a few years, this was a line that we talked about trying to, over time, gradually reduce. It is, really a subsidy line, and to some extent is masking the true, economic cost of the operations. So, I'm a bit concerned. I mean, it's going in the wrong direction. The original plan was step it down, from a few years back where it was at 300,000 to 250 to 200 to 150. That was my recollection of what we talked about as a board. So I do have concerns with that going up. Now, having said that, Doug did supply, I know the details, on his kind of separate operating budget, and I can see that he is operating at a loss, which I guess is not surprising. But I do worry that we continue to mask that to some extent, and I would rather see us kind of hold this flat, and I know it'll cause pressure and pain, but I think that'll also bring attention to the issue here, which is what we've got is not sustainable.
Well, at the risk of getting thrown off that board, I'll actually concur with that because I personally, my own opinion, and I'm really 1 of 5 on that board, is that it should be more self-sufficient than it is. So we gotta make it that way rate hikes. That should, because the town is bearing a lot of the cost for sewer users. I mean, a huge amount. We have the new bond. We can maybe use some of that for maintenance issues that we, would otherwise have in the operating budget. And, it costs what it costs. So if you're lucky enough to be on the sewer, you probably ought to pay a little more of your fair share, in my opinion.
So what we're discussing is taking the operations line 12 in WPCA from 300,000 back down to the 250,000. Doug, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Sorry, Doug.
You've got my backup on this, and obviously we borrowed 254,000 from account 222, which is our sewer development and maintenance. And even if you were to provide this extra 50,000 this year, we're still probably going to have to borrow at least 200,000 in the coming year. What I was thinking is this is not the time for a large increase. This year is not the time with what everybody's been going through. And I know it's not the time for the town to give out extra money either. It's just a tough year. But, if we have to borrow that money from that fund, right now that fund is in pretty good shape. But if we have to keep borrowing from it, that's not going to stay that way. So I can accept that with no problem. I understand the situation townwide. And it was just something that I thought I'd throw out there and see what happened.
Doug, what level of rate increase would it take to help lessen that problem? Because you've been running in the hole. Do you have a ballpark figure on the necessary rate increase?
We'd be probably talking about 15%.
And
you said 5%? Okay.
And to the average bill, Doug, that would do what, would you say?
Oh, I don't know exactly.
Be something like
not off the top of my head.
$5 a year, $20 a year, something like that.
To us, it probably doesn't seem like a lot of money, but to the people who seem to be having problems paying him now, I'm sure it would be a problem. But it is what it is. Like you said, Lynn, we are subsidized quite heavily. And we might also have to start increasing the fees in other areas to make up for that. So, in answer to your question, I think it would be somewhere around 15% increase to try and get us close to having a balanced budget. Based on what I know today, I don't know what our increases will be next year at this point, but so we'll see where we end up.
But if we stripped 50, that's a lot less of an increase. Right, the 15 would be to cover the entire nut that we're drawing down out of the other fund, right?
Right.
Okay.
How do other members feel?
I would support the reduction down to the 250, and certainly something that we'll want to look at in the future when we're looking at the whole system. Thanks.
I concur with Bob.
And I concur with Dave.
All right, Jim, under WPCA, can you take line 12 from 300,000 to 250,000, please?
Done.
All right. All right, we're on to police services, page 87 through 89. Any questions or comments there? No?
Sorry, Tim, it's Mike.
Go ahead, Mike.
So I think last time on Tuesday, we negotiated on row 20 to cut the funding for that police support specialist line in half, just given the timing and the likelihood in terms of when that role would be hired. So that seems like a very reasonable thing to do. I guess my only thought there, or other question is, is there any way to bring that on as a contracted position? I mean, it seems like there's so many unknowns in this space that, kind of committing to a permanent FTE right out of the box, it's just, I guess, I know our role is more the numbers, not necessarily the operational side in terms of implementation, but I guess, I can't help myself but to suggest that be considered, rather than jumping right in with an FTE.
You want to address that, Chief?
Well, I'm not sure that would work, Mike, from a perspective of oversight and accountability, because if you're doing it as a contractor type employment issue, then you have that whole different issue when the role of that person is to supervise, to train, and to do a variety of different things that we discussed. So I don't think we'd be able to do that as a contractor or a temp, if you want to call it, type position. This is going to become integral to the operations of the police department moving forward for a variety of things. We have a long list of duties, et cetera, that this role would take on and the need for it. And I don't think it's going to be something that we're going to be able to do as a contract. If something changed in the world and we figured out that we did not need that position, obviously we would be back, but I don't think it's headed in that direction for a long time. And I think it's something that we're going to be no doubt needing. This isn't something that's nice, this is necessary.
Chief, would this position be the person who provides the necessary video editing of all the body cam footage requested by a prosecutor or defense attorney?
Correct.
So this is going to be a more and more complicated position.
Correct, and also oversight of the dispatch center, which includes now, one thing that we forgot off of our long list of duties was, it's called EMD audit. So emergency medical dispatch, when a 911 call comes in and you have to provide medical advice, there's a certain number of audits that have to be done on those calls that are very time consuming. If something's not right or if something's wrong, you have to do corrective action. You have to go through all these type of checkoff lists for the state in certain numbers of, depending on your medical calls, to do that type of stuff even. And that is extremely time consuming. It's this guy behind me right here that also has to do that on top of the boat, on top of everything else that you've already heard about. So, I mean, there's just this list that just keeps coming in that are required of this, and this is that bridge, and it's a civilian. If not, then I have to go to somebody inside this building, and it's going to be much more expensive. So we're trying to take a chapter out of our neighbors that have had to do this, in particular Groton Town, that learned very quickly that this is essential. So I hope that helps.
This is Bob Stachin. I would somewhat support, one of the concerns, and I know a lot of this has been indicated over the last year in response to the police accountability, but a lot of the concerns at this point, as far as massive increases in insurance premiums, massive increases in capital expenses, exodus of officers, a lot of them have not come into fruition. And so I wonder if taking Mr. Farbach's suggestion that, having it as sort of a trial to see if the concerns actually come into fruition might be prudent at this point, and then assessing it in a year that isn't, we're not quite so burdened with the COVID issues. Thanks.
I would normally say that, Bob, but and the circumstances in the job description that we created here, everything that is attached to this is just going to be part of that person's duties to oversee that and do that. But it's going to have other things that are far-reaching within the police department itself. Just what I talked about is the auditing of the medical stuff that goes on.
You have to, now when we're going down accreditation, we're gonna have to institute new policies, procedures, new ways of doing things, all those things that we're gonna have somebody there to do that. Also, with all the technology that's coming in, you have to have a bridge and a gap with that to ensure that dispatchers and our records clerks are being trained to those levels and oversight. And it also adds another body in that dispatch center that can also be used in times of emergencies. And when 911's ringing off the hook, we have another person that's going to be available for that. That's just a side bonus that we have that's there. So we have a variety of things. I don't know if you can see it. We have the 2 lieutenants right here. They can certainly stand up and say help, as they were trying to explain during our presentations on how important this is. This isn't something that's nice. If it was nice, we'd be having a whole different conversation. This is essential as we move forward. The only thing that I can say that I'll offer this up as a sort of a, hopefully a money thing, because light bulbs went off and we're trying to, I forgot which one of the members said, hey, can you go back and look at your budget? So looking at the budget where you move the money out of the, into the MDT account, and then we bought one right now for $6,000 out of the technology fund. May I suggest, because we're talking about $37,000 or so, $35,000 is still remaining in that technology fund, that we would lower the MDT account by $35,000. I'll use the existing technology account to buy the MDTs. So basically, it's a wash as far as funding goes, so that we lower the SIP by another $35,000. I use existing money to buy the MDTs right now. We keep the police support supervisor going, and it's about a wash at this point in time. It is that important to us to have.
Chief,
How many percent do you currently down?
We're down 5.
You're down 5. How about Groton Town? How many are they down?
I don't know, but I think they're down 2 or 3.
They're down 3. Yeah. Groton City's down 3.
Hang on a second. Okay, before we get too sideways on this, Chief just had a suggestion that I'm trying to make sure we're all following along with.
Yeah.
And I know Jim is too. So what you're saying is, Chief, you want to take the MDTs down
to 15.
Okay, down to 15 from 50.
Right. I have 35 in the technology fund right now.
Okay.
We'll utilize that for the MDTs.
Let me do one thing at a time.
Yeah.
So Jim, can you go to the police SIP, and we'll take line 12, or I guess your different lines, the MDT replacement.
Okay, let's see, MDT, police, MDT replacement. So, okay, we added 31 the other day. So now we're backing out 35.
Correct.
Okay, done.
Okay. All board members clear what we just did there is the chief took 35 out of his technology account. Currently, they'll buy the MDTs, so he reduced his SIP, the MDTs, by that same 35 in an effort to help out the town, but also help with his overall budget. Any other questions from board members for Chief?
I have 2. Lynn, so Chief, were you okay with us, from a timing perspective, whacking that 75 in half, figuring the guy would start 6 months into the next fiscal?
Yes, because by the time we get all the equipment online, in the technology up and going, I think it's going to be an appropriate time frame. Obviously, we'd like it right out of the box, but under the current fiscal restraints, I think we can certainly, as long as we go in that direction, we will be fine.
All right. The next question I have is a general question, which typically the purpose of technology is to reduce human workload. So somehow every time we add technology, we're adding needs to, work harder and more. Is that more due to the accreditation process, or what?
You're adding video.
Yeah,
no, I know. We don't have, so we have no video now, none whatsoever. But
Right.
somebody suggested to me that video should actually make things like FOIA easier. Is that not so?
I don't think it's going to make it easier. I think it's going to be more time consuming.
It adds more FOIA, Lynn.
Okay, so it's just more to do because you got to do all the other stuff too?
Well, think about maybe a major scene that you have. Now you have every officer that's there. So say you had 3 officers on the scene of a bad motor vehicle accident, and then you have the 3 cruisers, and we get FOI for that through attorneys, the court, etc. So now that particular person, the police support supervisor, will have to go through, it could be 3 to 4 hours of in-car videos and 3 to 4 hours of officer videos to redact juveniles, license plates, witnesses, a variety of different things. And if it involves a crime of some kind, you have to do even more to do that type of stuff. The redaction software helps immensely, and that's going to be basically AI that does that is able to assist. But still, at the end, they have to watch all those videos, start to finish, to ensure that everything is taken out and edited, redacted, and then out the door it goes. So it's monumental if you have a case. You can only hope that you don't get a lot of these, and that's going to be the unknown. But I think it's going to be sort of a wave. You're going to have times that you got a bunch of them, but then you're also going to have times you don't have a lot. But one thing we're going to be assured of is that the court is now going to require these when arrests are made and a variety of different things. They already are requiring video for DWIs. So any DWI that comes into the building here, they want those videos that we have on our existing cameras and booking and in the cell blocks. So those are things that somebody has to, one of the sergeants has to spend hours every week downloading those, getting them out the door. So that's going to be something that we're gonna switch over to that person as well.
Okay, so it just is what it is. It's just however it happens. There's just more work being created that has to get done, whether technology does it or you do it.
Correct. Absolutely. I mean, technology can be your friend with information sharing and the ability to find things that 20 years ago you would have to physically or manually go somewhere and look it up. But it is a constant challenge in almost every law enforcement agency in this country on how to stay ahead of the curve, how to ensure that you have the right equipment and the right tools to continue to stay pace with what the public has and also what the criminals have. And that's always a challenge.
Okay.
Hi, this is Bob Stachin. It just on the subject, I'd be interested if I've somewhat heard that by having the video as well, a lot of other investigations actually don't come to fruition because people are confronted with the actual footage, and once they make a complaint against somebody, but once they see the video and they see that it's an unfounded complaint, it really doesn't it doesn't go as far. But I understand that there'll be, I mean, this is a learning process and moving through, but I have heard from other towns that is a result, that a lot of the sort of complaints, just once a person sees the video, they realize it's unfounded. They're not going to be able to go for it. So hopefully we'll get some relief from that approach as well.
Yes, I agree.
Other questions from board members?
It's Deb Norman, Chief. I'm just curious about the number of going up to 200% of physicals. I'm not suggesting we change that, but I'm just curious why.
We had to change that because of the police accountability bill. So physicals is also our mental health evaluations and our drug testing is all under that one line item. So
got it. Thank you.
Physical. So now every year we have to do 20% of the department for mental health evaluation and at least 1/3 of the department for drug testing. $250 an officer for the mental health evaluation, roughly, and another $250 for the drug testing.
Any other questions from board members?
I have a general question. Well, I have a general question. Chief, how many applicants do you used to get for an open police position?
back in the 70s and 80s, we used to fill the high school gym, or the cafeteria to 300 applicants. And
what about 5 years ago?
Maybe, because now we go through a regional testing process. You'd probably have over 100. So on Saturday, actually, we are testing. We have 17, now we're down to 13. 13 candidates are left for our physical assessment on Saturday.
And that's for 5 openings?
Correct, but we do have certified officers in all fairness. So we really have 2 processes. Officers that are already police officers and want to come here, and we have just sort of the raw recruit that is interested in coming here as a start of a new career.
But a lateral move, that guy has to take a physical too? Or do the physical?
Not a physical assessment. They have to do a physical, polygraph depending on what state they came from. We have to do a thing called comparative compliance, which is the police academy has to do evaluation of their training. Then we have to retrain them to the Connecticut standards. We also have to do a psychological evaluation. They have to go through an oral board. They have to take a written exam. They have to do an extensive background that includes credit and a variety of other checks and also drug testing.
Okay, I was just curious.
Any other questions from board members? Okay, moving forward to Human Services, page 93 through 95. Any questions on that section? Mr. Frischman?
I want to thank Member Norman for presenting many more passages about the new specialist on the community outreach on line 7, page 93. So thank you, Deb, for I'm going to withdraw my objection to that one, but not to worry.
Thank you, Glenn.
You're welcome. Would someone explain to me why the Stonington Free Libraries request is up $15,000?
I can speak to that, and I think Michaela's on too. Those were COVID-related expenses, but we also went back to discuss the, and Lynn can probably speak to this because I was not a part of the equation where they did 50, 25, 25. So I think that was going to be divided by the 3 libraries. However, in talking to Danielle, I believe that it's possible that we can put that into, it's not called CARES, I've forgotten the actual name now of what we're calling it, that for COVID expenses.
The American Recovery
Thank you.
Grant.
So we can reduce that expense by $15,000. Is that correct?
To go back to the formula that we.
Yeah, the formula.
So follow the formula and deal with the 15 outside of.
Later.
Okay, so we can remove 15, Mr. Chairman, is that?
That's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
Jim, line 40, hang on. Line 42 on page 94 now.
Done.
227, you bring it back to 212?
But we'll give it to them out of the CARES funding, yes?
Potentially.
That will be the future discussion once we're sure about the CARES funding and how we can spend it and do that. Yep.
Okay.
95. We got a couple questions there.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Fisher.
Page 95, line 61. That 50% increase, and that request was due last year. I thought that was a one-time last year. Why is it reappearing at a higher amount? This is page 95, version 8, line 61. The
Nature Center.
Is Nature, the Denison Pequot Seacoast Nature Center.
Is Deb net on? Or Deb or Leanne? That's for you then.
I can speak to that if no one is available to represent the Nature Center. Their request indicated that they needed the increase in order to maintain and support their giving garden. Due to COVID, once again, their volunteers had been significantly decreased. It relied on more staffing for the garden. Keep in mind, the produce from the garden supports efforts such as the United Way's Mobile Food Pantry, which visits Stonington and other towns within the region, serving hundreds of families in need. This request was specific to this year to keep that project going, to be able to grow the produce and distribute it. And I'm not sure, I don't see anyone's name off the top of my head that's represented here this evening.
So this is a one-time increase is what I'm understanding, and it'll be done away with thereafter.
And I don't want to speak for them, but I would be able to say that yes, if they were able to get the volunteers back in place, and if they were able to do fundraising as they had once done, as with a lot of our other nonprofits, that they would be in much different shape next fiscal year.
Okay. Line 65, Stanton Davis Homestead. This was another one that was due last year, and I see it. I thought that was a one-time, and now I see it here.
Well, it's an operational because
But that's a private entity. That's
they're a nonprofit.
But they're a private nonprofit. That's not a town agency.
None of
None of these are. But that's a brand new request. I'm a little hesitant. I would just soon eliminate that.
This request was in relation to the ADA entrance that they are installing at the homestead. And again, I don't see any names to represent the organization this evening. They did receive an agency award last year. Their request was bumped up this year to support that project. Actually, they had sent in their request after the deadline, so the request had remained the same at $3,000. They had put in for $5,000, but it hit the budget at $3,000. And again, it's to support the ADA work that they're doing to open up the homestead to the public.
But presently, it's not open.
It's not open right now. No, they still need to complete projects there before they would be able to open their doors. That's correct.
And they can solicit private donations. That's why I'm trying to control the taxpayer funding for some of these things.
I'm also wondering, it's Deb Norman, I'm also wondering if they're able to get grants, if there's any type of a match. I vaguely remember something, but there's no one here probably to answer that question.
I mean, to be perfectly fair, that entire column is the same thing, Glenn.
Yes, Deb, I do remember the presentation or packet a bit, and it was in regards to you, as I think a lot of these outside agencies point out, having a little bit of seed funding does help them, not just with matching money for grants, but also for soliciting donations. And because they haven't been able to be open and start charging or doing more extensive work, I'm sure that's why they're asking for this. But again, I'll leave this one to your discretion.
I would propose eliminating it.
So Mr. Frischman is proposing eliminating the funding for Stanton Davis Homestead on line 65. Other members, I'd like to hear from you.
It's Deb Norman. I'd like to put it to $1.
I agree. Lynn?
All right, this is Mike. Deb, can you just elaborate on what the strategy is with the dollar? Yeah.
I remember they had a compelling argument for, it's one of the oldest homesteads, I believe, in Stonington, possibly Connecticut, but I don't have all my facts. Again, I have a slant towards antiques, so I'm always going to fight for them. But I wish someone was here to speak for it, but I can't.
But are you suggesting $1? In other words, are you hoping that they come back at some point during the year and that we can then restore the funding? I'm just curious.
Not this year, but going forward, I think they're getting motion very slowly, and maybe that's something we can eliminate it. But I just thought if give them a little time and see if there's. But
no, sorry. Yeah, sorry if I wasn't being clear. I wasn't arguing to.
No.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand if there was a broader strategy there around suggesting I mean, because one thought is, I mean, yeah, I'll be honest, I don't know enough either. I really would like to better understand when this will be open to the public. And I mean, on the surface, I think it's a good thing, but it is one where I'd like to learn a bit more. So maybe the strategy of the dollar is to learn more at a later date, so that we can potentially then bring the funding back up. I support that, but.
Yeah, that was my thought, because I think eventually if they keep moving forward, it'll be a bit of a pull for people who like to see, again, it would be a good thing for the town, I believe, but they have a lot of work to do.
This is Leanne. I'm happy to reach out to my contact. We encourage each agency to have representation at each of these meetings for this reason. And I will reach out to my contact and just gather some more information and let them know what the outcome has been this evening and send along any more detailed information that I can after tonight's meeting.
Thanks, Ann.
I guess I would go along with that, with the dollar, in case there's something that needs to happen. It'll maintain the line. Is everyone okay with leaving it as $1?
Yeah, I can concur with $1.
Yes. This is Bob Stachin, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Jim, can you go to line 65 there and take the 3,000 for the Stanton Davis Homestead down to $1, please?
Done.
Okay. We did have one email that came in for line 57, Safe Futures, that had actually requested a $1,000 increase, but it was erroneously left at level funding in the budget book. So that 4,000 should actually be $5,000 for Safe Futures. Same page we're on, just line 57. Yep. And this was, the request just got in late, but Leanne, do you want to talk about the Safe Futures, what they do?
Sure, we have a representative on this evening as well, Karen.
Okay.
Do we have a Safe Futures representative on this evening?
Karen unmuted.
She just unmuted herself and remuted herself.
Okay, Karen, you're back muted again.
Until Karen can connect, I'm happy to speak about the request for the increase. There has been documented increases of domestic violence and over not just during COVID, but over the past few years, and in basically Safe Futures reaching out, assisting police officers, assisting our staff at Human Services has been an integral part of getting these folks assistance when they need it the most. Their numbers for Stonington are quite high. They come in serving, I believe, at least 200 residents each year. That's male and female residents of the town. They conduct multiple outreach programs within Stonington Public Schools, and again, regularly receive referrals from the police department as well as Human Services, as well as self-referrals from people in town. The funding that we were given in the past wasn't really even touching the amount that they were putting into our residents. So their request was just based on the increase in numbers that they've seen over the years, the increases in services in Stonington in regards to outreach, and specific to this past year, they've experienced significant increases due to the social isolation that COVID has presented with. And I know we do have a representative tonight that was here and ready to speak. And I apologize that they haven't been able to connect, but they're a very worthy organization that is providing a critical, much needed services unique to other nonprofits in our town.
Is that the organization that operates the shelter in New London?
That's correct. They have an emergency shelter and they provide emergency outreach and networking services as well, to provide shelter outside of the emergency shelter, whether it's in local hotels or elsewhere, for people escaping from emergency domestic violence situations.
I'll support that increase.
Okay, Mr. Frischman and I support the increase. How do other members feel?
I support it, Lynn.
I agree, Mike.
Yes, Bob, I agree.
Yep, agreed, Deb.
Jim, can you go to line 57 on this and change it from 4,000 to 5,000, please?
Done.
Any other questions, comments for the Human Services? No?
Sorry, Tim, it's Mike. Just looking at the ambulances, you know, there's pretty healthy increases there, ranging from 18% looks like to 75%. And I can appreciate, it's been an extremely difficult year for them, and I am supportive of raising that funding. But I guess maybe one question and one comment. I don't know if Leanne might be able to help, but in the documentation we received for Mystic River Ambulance, there really was no commentary. It was just a request for a 30% increase. Do we have any additional details from Mystic River, or did they? I mean, what was the basis for their increase relative to the rationale we were given on?
I believe, I think it's Michael Gilman that's online tonight that could speak to that.
Okay.
Yes. At the beginning of the COVID pandemic, I put, I'm Michael Gilman, president of the Mystic River Ambulance. At the beginning of the pandemic, I put a spending freeze when the prices of disinfectants, PPE, cleaning supplies started inching up, and then they skyrocketed. So we got a little over $20,000 worth of PPE from the state, and that's personal protective equipment that we wear on every single call now. And in addition to that, we spent $12,000 because the state stopped providing the equipment. So we were taking money out of our new ambulance account. And this money is strictly to rebuild the ambulance account and to further purchase PPE.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I guess maybe the one thing I would add here is, again, I'm sympathetic and I know I understand, but I guess we just have to be careful about this creating a kind of new baseline for these expenses. So I think if the other members of the board are kind of aligned with that thing, I mean, I would support this increase, but with an understanding that we likely can't sustain it at this level, moving forward, that we would have to recognize that this has really been driven by the incremental financial pressures put on these guys by the COVID pandemic.
If this is PPE and stuff like that that's for COVID, I would think that we would want to take it out of your operating budget and pay for that through some of the American Recovery Act funds that we've received, whatever it is. I'm going to butcher that name all night. Danielle's laughing at me here. That we would do that. Would you be amenable to that, Michael?
Yes, if we qualify.
Yeah. It's first responder stuff. That was clearly in our in our permissible spends of the monies that we received. So, so can we? Where should we bring you back down to the 38.5?
Yes.
Okay.
Tim, does that apply to all of them? All the ambulances?
No, it does not. Stonington ambulance had to go to the incentive program. What is it? What am I? Stipend program. Thank you. To get the coverage, so that was a different scenario. And I don't know about Westerly ambulance.
There are representatives from both online tonight.
Let me do Mystic River first, Leanne. Jim, can you take line 68 there and bring it back down to 38.5, please?
Done.
Leanne, we got a little interference when you were saying that. Is there a representative from the Westerly ambulance on?
Yes.
Yes, I'm here. I'm Ron McDonald, President, Westerly Ambulance.
Could you just review for us the change from the 42.5 to the $50,000 request you got, please?
Sure. There's a few different reasons. One, the contract we have to have with the town of Stonington now, all the ambulance services, there's a possible increase in the insurance requirements, which we're researching now. Also, it's due to lost call volume due to the COVID pandemic and basically a loss of revenue we're trying to recover. This year budget, we already started approximately $100,000 in the red, and we had a substantial loss last year in revenue. So it's basically just to keep our operational funding above board, because we already had to withdraw a substantial amount out of our savings account to supplement our operational budget.
Questions from members?
Tim, it's Mike. I mean, that sounds pretty similar to me, pandemic related, and that you would think it would qualify for the American Recovery Plan funds.
I think as long as it's not, like, Stonington Ambulance is an ongoing operating, if these two aren't gonna come back again next year, then I think we can use the under clause 1 of the American Rescue Plan Act.
Isn't that largely to PPE and COVID-related costs?
COVID costs for first responders qualifies as that. So could we then take your 50 and bring it down to the 42.5 again and pay for that 7,500 through the funding we received for the COVID funds?
I'm not quite sure if that would be allowable, because it's not a tangible like PPE supply. It's more operational. I'm not quite sure.
That's the same.
That would cover that.
From our restrictions, that's the same, because it can cover overtime for first responders, that kind of thing. So doesn't have to be a tangible asset. Is the latest information we have.
Yeah, I can just very quickly, what we're thinking is that to respond to COVID health impact or economic impact, and categories of people who can get money from this are households, small businesses, nonprofits, and any industry impacted. So, I mean, ambulances clearly I feel more secure there than I do of some of the other ones.
Paid out of CARES.
A very good split.
Well, if we have the assistance of the town in helping us process that, I wouldn't see an issue with it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it'll come through the town. So, okay, we'll do that. So Jim, can you take line 69 down to 42,500, please?
Done.
Other questions from members?
Yeah, Tim, it's Lynn. Can you just give me the very fast, quick and dirty on the Stonington ambulance problem? I had to miss that meeting.
I can do that if you'd like.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, Nishan Sahu, Vice President, Stonington Ambulance. Lynn, specifically this is related to two things. So top line, I hope you have a copy of the presentation. I know you're interested in the billing data. You'd see that, billing, unfortunately, has had calls last year. The reimbursement rate has dropped significantly. And then even write-offs have gone up. So top line, we're facing some pressure. And then the biggest expense increase was moving to a stipend program that was more in line with our neighboring partners. We were paying a $12 rate. We had to move that up to $17. That incurred that's a $33,000 cost right there. And that's really one for one where our request is coming in for the increase this year. Since that's an ongoing expense, that's why we added it to our operating budget. And if you look at our financial overview, even with the request at $74,000, we're still looking at a potential deficit this year compared to prior years. So that's the main reason for the request.
Thank you.
I had a meeting.
Yep, she's good. Any other questions from Human Services? All right. Board of Education, and I want to remind everyone right now, we're talking about the operating budget. Any questions for Dr. Riley or the folks that are on? None? Okay. So then we should go back to the SIP. Roger, do we have Chris? Okay. Chris Williston, are you on for Stonington Schools?
Yes.
There he is. All right. We wanted to go over the 400,000 in your SIP request for district computers peripherals.
Yep.
Mike, did you want to ask?
Yep, Chris, it's Mike. Yeah, thanks for that additional detail. I guess my question, and I appreciate the prioritization. I think I understood, priority one, these wireless access for SMS and switches for the high school. And I can get my head around the desktop infrastructure data center workload as well. But it was priority three in particular. I was trying to understand what are thin client workstations for computer laptops and how critical a priority is that?
So the thin client workstations are going to be replacing the current 7 and 8-year-old Mac desktops that we have deployed in the computer labs. Thin client is essentially just an endpoint that connects back to the virtual servers. So priority one, the virtual desktop infrastructure, that's what runs our virtual desktops. So these are much cheaper clients, and we can do a lot more and deploy them, and it runs simultaneous desktop loads on one server. So if you think of it from a density perspective, you buy one big box and you're running lots of desktops from that box virtually. The endpoints or thin clients at around $300 a piece are significantly cheaper than the $1,000 a piece iMac workstations that we would be replacing them with. So it's essentially the classrooms throughout the middle and high school that we have computer labs in.
Okay, and did you say, I'm sorry, at the beginning you said that they're about 7 years old and
7 to 8 years old, depending on the lab. Yes.
Okay. So it is at the point where you're feeling like it's got to be replaced, or is this something that you're replacing it because really the technology is outdated, or are you replacing it because it may fail and best practice would indicate that you should replace it? I'm just trying to get a sense for how critical it really is.
All three, really. So 5 years is best practice to replace enterprise grade technology. We have multiple operating systems, so these are not all the same workstation type, which also adds to headaches of managing them. This would bring them all into the same platform, and with that, the latest, greatest technology with these thin clients. So one thing we can look to do if we need to make the cuts is, we can replace a few of the labs. We can do a portion of these and sort of limp along with the repair budget as well. But it's really a combination of all three of those factors.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Other members have questions for Chris?
Yeah, this is David Motherway. Chris, thank you so much for passing on the information on the Chromebooks. Very, very helpful. Really appreciate that. I just, based on the descriptions that you shared, it's about 2,800 devices, about 550 of those are spares. And so when I do the math on the student population, obviously it highlights my ignorance on the use here, but we're at like a 51% surplus, right, on Chromebooks to students. So just trying to understand what's happening with those Chromebooks that we need more than one a student.
Sure. So basically what we're looking at with that 2,800, that's including all of the broken devices that are either pending repair or pending decommission. That is including kiosks, that includes loaner carts when students do not have their Chromebook. We have a device out for repair.
Chris, hold on just a second. Based on your definition, provisioned are 2,800 that are in use or spare, right? So they're active units in your process, right? 5,500 spare delivery. I guess I just need more information to understand how many are actually being used.
Yeah, so of the 2,800, we have roughly 2,200 in use, active. There's about 550 of those that were provisioned, or rather slated for decommissioning last year as part of the middle school refresh. So those we decided to keep in production, so to speak, because with COVID-19, we went one-to-one with K through 12 Chromebooks, and we knew those students were going to be traveling back and forth. I don't know if you've ever seen a kindergartner carrying a Chromebook on and off the bus, but there's a high risk of damage and repair. So that was sort of our self-insurance policy, rather than the families having to pay for that insurance or anything like that out of pocket for the last year. We use those as that sort of self-insurance policy, if you will. So we have lots of spares right now that are going to be over 5 years old. We have, of the 2,800, 650, give or take, that are going to be at the auto update expiry this summer. So those 650 devices are the high school devices that we're looking to replace. In addition, we will be decommissioning and disposing of the middle school ones that were supposed to have been decommissioned and disposed of last year, if that adds clarity.
So help me understand. So you kept one group as insurance, but this year you're not going to keep the insurance?
No, so next year, the 650 from the high school we get back, we keep those and we decommission and retire the 550 devices, give or take, that should have been decommissioned last year. So the goal is each year we replace all of the Chromebooks for one building. That's a 4-year life cycle, which leaves 1 extra year before they're actually listed as auto update expiry. We keep those extra devices in decent working condition as spares for the district. We keep those as parts. We cannibalize these Chromebooks. We do all of our own repairs in-house, so we can swap parts out and things like that. So that's what gives us the flexibility to not have to purchase additional spares. We sort of keep those year 5 devices as spares throughout the district.
Okay, so I thought I must have misunderstood you, because I thought you said you were going to get rid of the high school ones, which would be in essence just like the middle school ones that you used as insurance. You're going to keep those like you did before as insurance.
Correct. Yeah, we'll probably keep, of the 650, 500 of them, 150 are typically missing keys, cracked screens, unreported damages, things of that nature. We cannibalize parts that we can. The rest are green recycled. We have a responsible electronics recycling vendor we use. The middle school ones that were slated for decommissioning last year, those will be retired next year as well. So all in all, it'll be the 650 plus. And when I say we're keeping, 500 out of that 650, they're in production, but they're really spares. We fill out additional kiosks. They're for parent registration, you name it. They're one-off deployments. A lot of the times they're temporary, where we see spikes, so that we don't have to purchase additional Chromebooks mid-year. We kind of use those as our floater, and they tend to fail at a much faster rate since they're already 5 years old and have been seeing a lot of use at that time.
And so if you had to operate on the bare minimum, what would that be?
To operate on the bare minimum moving forward for our one-to-one deployment?
I guess what I'm asking is, you have 550 of spares, right? I mean, what's an acceptable number of spares? Or do you go through all 550 in a year?
No, we do not go through all 550 in a year. We probably go through half of that. It's a fine buffer, and that way, those devices, we have a lower failure rate for the devices that the students have. They have better technology in the Chromebooks. Each year they come out with a new model. So by not having those students carry around the year 5, originally we had slated 3 years for these devices for students. That's what most districts use for the average life. One-to-one device is 3 years. We feel that we can stretch it to 4 years, knowing we have that safety net of those fifth-year devices. So that next year we replace an entire building at a clip. That gives us, one-to-one for the whole building. And then what we do is we have those extra devices for anywhere and everywhere that we need those. So if the question is, can we keep less spares, meaning more of those devices are actively deployed in with students, we certainly, I'm just wary that we will see a much higher damage and repair rate with these 5-year-old devices than we will, say a 4-year-old example. It's an exponential rate after year 3 where these have a higher and higher failing rate.
Totally understood, right? But if you have 250 unused spares, that means we're over budgeting by 250, right? I mean, and understanding you need 250 for spares because, I haven't seen a kindergartner come off the bus, but I can imagine in a long time, seen it a bunch of times in the past, but never with the Chromebook. So I'm sure that 250 spares is absolutely necessary, but I would very much like to understand a plan that gets us to 250 spares.
The other piece to keep in mind, if we're using those 5-year-old devices, we're now mix and matching models within each of the buildings. We try to keep the same make model device at each of the buildings so that we can have different organizational units, have different update levels. So they have what's called the stable channel, which is meant for the update version of Chrome for those Chromebooks. They then have a beta and developer channel, which allows us to take small subsets of each of the schools and put them into those advanced OS channels to start to experience problems with certain apps extensions. It becomes a lot more complicated when we have, say, 2 or 3 different models within the same building. So we're trying to keep the refresh so that each building and all the grade levels within that building are on the same make model, so it provides an easier to troubleshoot and identify potential issues.
A complicated FIFO problem.
Indeed.
Deb Norman, do they provide, or do you provide covering protection for them, or is that up to the student?
This past year, we did purchase some cases. So our middle school, grades 6, 7, and 8, we purchased cases for 2 years ago with their Chromebook refresh. They've always been a one-to-one school for the last 3 years now. We did purchase cases for some of the younger grade levels to help cut down on some of those damages as well. Yep. High schoolers, it's optional. They can go out and purchase their own Chromebook case as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Chairman, this is Jim Sullivan. If I may ask Chris a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Chris, I just want to verify with you on line 171. We had other non-governmental grants of $100,000 coming in to offset your computer cost line on 128. That's the E-rate grant at 50%. Looks like based on your email today, you're expecting that reimbursement to only be $93,000. Is that correct?
Correct.
Should I decrease that grant amount coming in by $7,000?
Yes, and what we did is we hedged the bet because we know this is going to bid. It's actually out for bid currently. So with a competitive bid, we know it's going to come in lower than the quotation I provided you with. So if you look at the number I sent you there, Jim, the 186, the E-rate reimbursement is 50% of what we will end up spending up to a certain amount, but we have 5 years to spend our completely allocated amount. So that'll be $93,000 is the expected grant return, not $100,000.
Okay, so Chairman, I would propose then that I decrease the expected reimbursement on line 171 by $7,000.
Agreed.
Okay, all set.
Okay.
If Mr. Willis could answer, what would be the number
to provide for 250 spares instead of 500 on line 130, what would that number be?
So again, if we're going to start mixing the models and sort of doing an on-the-fly spare, as I believe Mr. Motherway was suggesting, I would say we could reduce, knowing that some of these repairs can come out of our operational repair budget as well. I would say we could reduce by $30,000, and with that reduction of Chromebooks purchased, use that to split the difference in those spare devices.
Would seem to make sense.
Bob Statchin, I would just, I appreciate Chris's background in this and the understanding as far as the need for replacements, the need to have these backgrounds, especially in this time when you have a lot of kids who are still, who are still remote and going back and forth. So I would want to support his request as provided, and based on his assessment of the situation.
Chris, a quick question for you that just came to mind. With potentially needing some expanded schooling through the year to make sure we're getting kids up to speed or up where they need to be, which I do appreciate. Do you anticipate that extra workload or transit on the Chromebooks will yield unusual? Do you expect the numbers to continue as normal with that additional classwork, or do you think that may have a negative consequence on your spares?
No, I expect it to continue as normal. We budget for the extended school year, summer schooling. We budget for all of that in our repair estimates. So I don't expect that number to change at all.
Okay. And if we were to take the 30,000 out, I want to make sure you're very clear with us that would that be a negative effect to the school, or would that be, you would be able to manage that with no negative effect to the kids?
If we remove $30,000, that'll be removing approximately 125 of the newly purchased devices. So that would be sort of splitting that 250 difference for us. And we could certainly go through. Again, it would be tight, but I can do my best to make it work for the school. I want to work with the board here.
What if we did 20? What if we took 20 grand out? Does that make it a little less tight?
That's only better.
How other members feel?
This is Lynn. I think we should try it and see what happens.
Yeah, and there's also available technology to help you put together a plan that ensures there's just a handful of variables here, right? It literally is a FIFO problem, and it can be managed down to the exact units, right? Based on the data that you have. So I don't know what the number is, but I because I don't have access to all the information, but the number is achievable. And what I would, I actually will support Member Statchin's position that we fund the whole line item. But the reason I say that is that I don't want to have a negative impact on the program or schools this year. But what I would like to do is make sure that we understand going into next year, what is the exact number? What's the process? And someone's got dogs or something. But I think the plan has to be put in place to operate in that model. So my recommendation is to work on the current plan and And I'll have an expectation of understanding exactly what the flow will look like, because I'm going to do the math. You gave me the numbers, and I'll let you know what it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can reevaluate come summer.
Okay, so what's the sense of the other members of the Board of Finance to go with the Chris's suggested number, or take a reduction in that number?
I will just, Mike.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I was of the mindset that, you know, let's run the experiment and then have Chris let us know if it doesn't work. I mean, is it manageable to have, you know, different models, you know, mixed or serving as replacements? And if it's not, you know, let us know, and you know, we won't do it again. But it sounded like, I guess thought I was hearing from Chris, we could make it work. It was worth it though. And that 20,000 won't really impact the students per se. It's just going to be more, you know, challenging inventory situation, and again, potentially mixing models. But I was willing to try that experiment for a year and then get the feedback.
I still am too. It's Lynn.
Lynn, it was a little bit of feedback before you said anything.
Oh, I'm still a proponent of the experiment.
So that would be to take how much out?
30.
Mike, what did you want to take out? 30?
Well, I probably was where you were, Tim, which is take out the 20, give them a little bit of wiggle room in case in case the experiment's not running so well, you know. But it feels like, you know, I think you know, David is onto something here, and that there's an opportunity, and let's try and make it, you know, make it work. So I don't know. I feel like 20 gives them a little bit of insurance.
That's fine with me.
Deb, I support 20 as well.
Okay.
But
Jim,
sorry. It's Mike. Can we just go back to David? I mean, David was the one that put it on the table, so I should make sure.
Yeah, no. I thank Chris for presenting it, and I'm sold on the 20, and I will, you know, work with Member Frischman and Chris and the chairman of the board to look over the data between now and the summer, and keep an eye on the experiment, so that if we have to do something else, a line item transfer or something to, you know, throughout the year, to make sure that we solve problems. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, and another, you know, thing to point out too is, in terms of historical data to go off of, right? We've only been 1-to-1 with the middle school thus far. We were 1-to-1 with, you know, SHS and the elementaries the last year. So I think we'll now at least have a year and change of data to go off of with repair rates and things like that, and we can start to reevaluate what those numbers look like come summer. So I thank the board for that.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Jim Sullivan, can you take line 130 in the SIP from 195,000 down to 75,000, please?
Done.
Are there any other questions at this point from the board, or are we ready for Jim to give us an overview of where we stand at this point? Jim, can you give us an overview of where we are, much that you did yesterday, please, or on Tuesday, please?
Okay, the operating budget as presented is at, well, not the operating budget, the overall budget is 73,136,000. Pardon?
Can you break down general operation, you know, general education?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, okay. General operations is $23,893,408. And that's a 1.13% increase over prior year. Education is the same as it was Tuesday, $38,335,596. That's a 2.5% increase over prior year. Again, debt service is the same as it was Tuesday, $8,134,208. That's a 0.64% increase over prior year. Capital improvements, that did change tonight. This number is down to $2,773,319. That's a 13.72% increase over prior year. Overall increase for all departments, Board of Ed, including SIP, is 2.22% in total expenditures. If we move on to mill rate impact, the mill rate as it stands right now would be 23.85 mils. That would be a 0.49 increase in the mill, which would be a 2.1% increase. Increase in the mill. It would be 0.49 mil increase, 2.1% increase. Excuse me. And revenues, revenues to taxes to be raised would increase by 3.59%. Is there any other metric that you wanted to hear, Tim?
Can you just give me the total budget number right now?
Total budget number is $73,136,531.
I'd like to get input from the board members as to their opinion on this, as we have gotten this down to this point.
I think this is, though I would love to see lower, I think this is a responsible budget, and I would support it.
Mr. Frischman would support the budget as presented. Mike Feuerbach?
So maybe just to clarify, I guess, we had put a lot of the Board of Ed items down to just $1 there, the capital item. So I think just make sure we're all on the same page. The intention there for a number of those is to see how we can seek the American Rescue Plan, right? Funding for a number of those items, correct? I mean, that's our game plan there.
That is correct, Mike.
Yeah.
And how are we doing that?
That is ongoing work between the Board of Ed, the superintendent, and the first selectman and myself has been all working on, and the finance director, on interpretation and getting input from congressional offices, from CCM, from a lot of different municipality and points of research that we can figure out what we're planning on doing and how it fits in with exactly that. The education department is trying to finalize what they need to do summer-wise, going forward-wise, and they have that money's coming in. So because the money's just hit recently, it's very hard to move as quickly as really we're trying to, but it's been collaborative to this point.
This is Bob Stachin. Is there anyone from the Board of Ed or the Education Department that would want to speak to that they're comfortable with this course of action?
Yeah, hi, this is Van Riley, Superintendent. I would just like everyone to know where we are with this. We are developing our plan to present to the Board of Education at their meeting on April 8th. We are in the process of the application excuse me, for the CARES 2 funding. We have no idea when the application of the process for the new funding, the $2.8 to $3 million is going to be available. We're working on the $1.24 million allocation, and we will again be bringing that to the Board of Ed on April 8th. And as I said a couple meetings ago, we're more than happy to share that, our process and what our our hopes and our goals are with the Board of Finance. I think that'll be important.
So Tim, it's Mike again. So yeah, no, I'm glad to hear that from Dr. Riley, and I think there are a number of important items that we did put down to $1 under the assumption that we would be successful in the path that he just outlined. So I guess it's just as long as we've got commitment from the Board of Finance to certainly work with the Board of Ed and the school administration if things don't proceed as planned, that we'll work on this together. But under that assumption, I'm largely comfortable with where we're at. Although one other item I guess I'd like to throw out there is we still do have some money left over in the current fiscal year from that $1 million we set aside for WPCA, and I think it's down about $400K left there. And we probably don't want to burn the entire amount, given that we still have another quarter of the current fiscal year. But is there a way to maybe get a little bit more creative here? I think we talked about accelerating some paving in a prior discussion. Is there a way to maybe even reduce slightly the paving activities that are proposed in the next fiscal year's budget by, taking advantage of some of that WPCA money in the current fiscal year budget? I guess I'll throw that out there. I don't know, Jim, could you see a path to do that, for instance?
Well, I'm sorry, did you say Jim, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay, this is Jim Sullivan. Well, before we go down the path about, doing more cutting or this type of thing, what I think I just heard, I just want to reiterate what I think I just heard from the superintendent, is that he's going to be presenting his plan to the board on April 8th. This budget, as we leave tonight, will be going to a public hearing on April 1st, a week ahead of that. And at that meeting, based on input from the public, the board will have the opportunity to change the figures up or down. After that meeting, we'll have another deliberations meeting subsequent, right directly after that public hearing. But that following day, we have to have final numbers, I believe, to get published to have it in time for the town meeting. So you won't have the luxury of knowing the results of that April 8th meeting or what the Board of Ed's plan is for those funds. Just having said that, just keep that in the back of your mind when you're proposing more cuts here, there, or anywhere. As far as to answer,
yeah, go ahead, Jim.
To answer your, go ahead, Tim.
Okay, what I was going to say is that some of the funds could be used for this, but we need to, there are a couple other things that are happening behind the scenes that may need some funding as well, that are imminent projects that are not necessarily on all of our radars. So the more we can hold back from that WPCA funding to expend it in the budget at this current time, it will give us flexibility for other things that are happening that would not need all of them, but would need perhaps half of them to deal with. So in some regard, we can carry that WPCA money forward to the following year and either fund something that is imminent, that's at $1 that we need to take a look at, or add to line items that are going to overrun or have an issue there. So we've got a lot of unknowns happening between now and when we're trying to get the budget out. So as much flexibility as we can maintain, I'd like to.
I agree, Mr. Chairman. Also, the charter prescribes that our public hearing must be held no later than the first Monday in May. So if need be, we could move that public hearing back. Now, we would perhaps forego the opportunity to have 3 referendums, and that's a risk. Because we have to have the mill rate in place and set by the 15th of June. So the tax bills can go up.
if I would venture, not to up to all of you, but a lot of work goes on behind the scenes to set these dates, which is why we asked to set these in August of this year. And I don't necessarily think pushing that back a week or two, as Dr. Riley said, they're just discussing CARES, not American Rescue Plan. So they're just discussing the first 1.24 they're getting, not the 2.6. So and Dr. Riley, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're going to need more time than a few weeks to figure this out. So I wouldn't necessarily push back our date to work around that schedule.
Yes, that's true. We'll be presenting on April 8th again the current 1.2. We're also looking at timelines. Some of these funds can be used retroactively. And I believe Chairman Tedesco has already talked about not requesting the funding, the $570,000 that we had originally asked related to COVID to the Board of Finance. That'll have to come back to the Board of Ed. They already made a decision to request that. But this is going to be a multi-year plan, a recovery plan for our students, for our children. We need to look at the time frames, what we need to do immediately. It's not just summer, it's summer and next year and the following summer, and all kinds of different assistance to help our students academically and emotionally. So it will be a dynamic presentation. We're not going to have all the answers on April 8th because things will change as assessments change and as the student needs change. But we will talk about all that with our board. And again, they'll be giving us direction on the 8th.
Given that input from Dr. Riley, I don't think we're going to have a situation where we will get, if we delayed the public hearing by 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I don't think we would get really any information that would enable us to make separate decisions, is my opinion, okay? Just my opinion, but I'm welcome to the input from the other members of the board as to how they would like to go. But I think keeping as much, given that time frame that Dr. Riley is talking about and the long draw out that we're all seeing, I would like to maintain, the town to maintain as much flexibility as we can. I think that this is a responsible budget that we put together, and I would be a little bit hesitant to use too many more funds to try and push this down.
I wouldn't use any more funds to try to push this down.
This is Bob Stach, and I support this budget. I think it's responsible, and I appreciate Dr. Van Riley for coming to this. And part of my support is based on the fact that from what I'm hearing from you, you are comfortable with the timeline and presenting this budget as is to the public, despite some of the cuts that we've had in regards to the CIP, and you are, as far as, again, that you think this is an appropriate course of action to take at this time. And again, understanding the Board of Finance is ready to work with you should circumstances change.
Yes, of course, there are some things in the SIP especially that we would like to have, but I understand the pressures, the financial concerns that the Board of Finance has. I certainly appreciate your moving forward with the 2.5% operating budget. That was very important for us, and we will share with you what we're thinking with the federal funds as we move forward over the next several years. But yes, I would support where you are right now. Thank you.
Other members of the Board of Finance, Mike Fauerbach, what's your current opinion?
No, I would. I'm good with the 2.1% mill increase. I think that's reasonable. It's very aligned, I think, with where a number of us were when we started the deliberations on Tuesday evening. And I'm glad to hear that Dr. Riley is comfortable as well with where we're at. So I'm ready to move forward. Thanks.
Lynn?
I just have a question. Jim, what's the projected excess over 2 months, the fund balance?
Give me a second. I got some papers here. Well, starting the year 7/1/20, we had a 2-month in excess of the 2-month reserve of $2.5 million. I expect that for 2021, we'll see a surplus of at least 250,000. So I expect that number to go up to 2.7 million.
Okay.
And just to note that 250 surplus really, that would be a 750 surplus. It should be a 650 surplus, except I'm accounting for $400,000 use of fund balance that we budgeted for. So, and I would say that's probably the minimum. It'll likely be more, but I wouldn't be comfortable saying anything higher than that.
Okay. And historically, I don't. You may not know this at the top of your head here, but historically, what has that number been like?
2 months above reserve.
Yeah.
Well, since I've been here, I can't say in dollar amounts, but since I got here, when I got here, it was around 23%. And it stayed about 22, 23 for my first couple of years. And then with the turnover in the Board of Finance was seemed to take the tack that they wanted to draw that money down, that the town was holding too much taxpayer money and wanted to draw down to closer to the 2 months operating, which is 16.67%. And I think ultimately where the board landed was they're going to do the 16.67%, which is 2 months operating, plus $1 million as an extra cushion. So I think that's what the board's philosophy has been for the last few years.
Anybody have any opinion about that?
Yeah, I like that philosophy. But I know, we got up pretty high when it was getting up into 23%. I would not rush to move that down at this time until we really see what continues to happen with this COVID. So I would be a little hesitant to reduce that number. If we're looking at 250,000 increase, I think that's it's a small amount relatively comparison to move it up.
Yeah, I just think it's a source of funds potentially to tap depending on what happens with this CARES 3 thing.
Exactly, and I would like to hold it back personally, so that it is a source of funds depending on what happens with the CARES 3. Exactly what you're saying, Lynn.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
You're welcome.
Given all that, what's your feeling on this budget, Lynn?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think a lot depends on what the utility of the CARES funding is going to be, obviously. So, and I don't know what the ramifications of what's going on with interest rates is going to be, or how long that's going to persist. But it may make doing a bond a lot more difficult, and it may make doing the refi that we're talking about more difficult if it keeps on going. So, today was another day where they backed up pretty good. So there's a market correction going on here. So I just, $500,000 is fine, but there's a lot of stuff missing in this, right?
Yeah. Deb, Norman?
I support the 2.1 increase. There's just too many moving pieces to 100. I mean, I'm happy with it.
Dave, by the way?
Tim, I like where we are as a number. My concern is if we have to take all those dollars back up and we don't have funding, then that would be a very different story, right? So the way the number is now with the SIP figures that were moved to 1, I think but if the federal funding doesn't come through the way we hope, and I've come to understand that hope is not a strategy. So I'm concerned, but I like where we are now with the numbers.
So I have unanimous board support for the budget as presented currently. Can I get a motion? I'm going to line this all out, right?
Yeah, we're going to line this out. Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion that we adopt the budget for general government, $23,893,408. For Board of Education, $38,635,000.
Nope, 335,000.
It's at 335,000?
Yes.
300, miscopied. 335,596. Debt at 8,134,208. And capital improvement budget of $2,773,319. Overall budget will be $73,136,531.
Second.
Mill rate.
Hang on a second. Hang on.
The new mill rate will be 23.85 mils, an increase of 0.49 mils.
I have a motion from Mr. Frischman. Can I get a second from Ms. Jones?
Yes, now you can.
Thank you. Any discussion from board members on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, please state your name and that you're opposed. Motion unanimously carries. At this point, I'll say thank you to everyone, department heads and all that who are on. We will not do anything more at the budget at this time, but Board of Finance members, please remain so that we can go over debt services one more time with Jim. But thank you all for your work and your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairman Ossowski.
Thank you.
Chief?
Thank you, guys.
Board of Finance members, just give us 1 second. We're just clearing out the room here so that they don't have to hang around and listen to us. Roger, everyone else off the call? Essentially. Yeah, but we're not going to get interrupted by ins and outs. Okay. All right. Jim, now's the time I'd like to go over the debt refinancing and the potential impact and that in a little more in depth with the board members so that everyone is afforded the opportunity to ask questions.
Okay. Let me try to lay my hand on my. Oh, okay. All right, I'm ready if you are.
We're ready.
So if everybody has it's still the same two scenarios I sent a week or two ago. Again, scenario one, we'd be looking at over the remaining term of the 14-year term of the bonds that are still outstanding. We have the possibility to save $835,000 over the term of those bonds by refunding them at the projected. Well, again, this was done 3 weeks ago, and the assumed interest rate was 1.5%. We know that's going to change. But assuming we decided to structure it so we could take our savings up front, we're looking at in year one the refinance, which would be fiscal 21-22. We had the opportunity to save $677,000 in cash flow in debt service. That's if we take it all up front. If we were to do it evenly over the remaining life of the refunded bonds, the first year savings would be roughly $66,000, and roughly 66 for each of the remaining years. That would total 915, but the difference, the delta between the 835 and the 915 is just a time value of money. So there's really no difference in those two numbers. So, we're working on the OS. I've been putting my part together for the financial advisor. They're working on theirs. When they start structuring the debt in the OS, they'll need to know how you want to structure it, savings up front or savings over the term of the debt. And once they do that, they can plug in whatever interest rate assumption we think might be there. So if we think it's going to be 1.7% in another month and a half, we can plug that in once they have it structured. And you know, having the changing interest rate, it's more complex going out the other years. Obviously, it's not going to change it's not going to be the same change for years. The outer years are going to have, the rates will be changing at different rates. So essentially, that's what we're dealt with. We need to decide how we want to structure it, and then we can play with the interest rates as over the next couple of weeks, depending on what the market does. And I can go back and forth with the financial advisor, and he'll say yes, it's still a go, or no, it's not a go, or it's a push. Leave it up to the Board of Finance, that type of thing. So, your thoughts?
So,
I have some.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So Jim, just a question or two. So one of the things that was throwing me off, you said, the difference in the savings, or the annual savings is just due to, the cash flows, but you were saying a moment ago that in theory, it's the same value, and just the differential is due to the time value of money. But where I'm struggling a little bit is, then why isn't the present value, there's a PV calculation, lower on in these spreadsheets, and one does in fact have a higher present value than the other. So what am I missing there? Should the present values of both of these been the same?
The same.
Well, I would think that it's present value, probably in the sense that, let me start again. As I said earlier, I think it's probably going to be changing. It's not going to be a one-to-one, present value, because depending on how you structure it, the outer years are going to have different interest rates. Or actually, I don't know if that makes sense. It even makes sense.
Yeah. I guess I would have just assumed that they would have given us an offering that had the same present value, but just two different, schedules. So, I mean, general, finance 101 would say, take the deal that gives you the higher present value, which is, the 827 and present value, and that's more the payments up front.
But that's a good question. I wish I could answer that. I mean, I did specifically ask the question what the delta was, and was told it was the present value. But looking at the descriptors below, you are correct. They do show different. I mean, it's a $4,000 difference, so it's not great.
Yeah.
So I would think that's probably a variable in fluctuation in interest rates in the outer years. Would be my best guess, and that would be my guess. I can get further clarification though if you.
I know it's not huge, but it's $4,000 or $5,000, and it just I just want to.
Well, it's just weird.
Yeah, exactly.
It's weird.
I was struggling to understand. Am I missing something else if those numbers aren't the same?
Because it can't even be the time value of money going out that far. So, I mean, it could just, who knows? Maybe they missed the decimal point or something, 0.01 or something in whatever their rate they were using. But it's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, may I ask a question? If we take the savings up front, then effectively we're going to see a higher mill rate of necessity in the out years, because we captured that savings in year one. Is that correct?
Well, yes. I mean, your debt,
higher debt service.
Your debt service will be higher, but your debt service it'll still be lower than it would have been without the refunding.
Right, it's lower than it would have been, but we're going to have an artificiality in a sense, because we took all that savings up front, whereas we amortize over the life of the note, we won't slug the mill rate, and therefore the taxpayers will see something more uniform. That's a different tax, but that's what I would recommend.
Well,
it's probably not enough to matter, but to be noticeable in a mill rate. But yes, that's true.
Mike Fauerbach, I figured out the $4,000 difference.
What is it?
The net present the net present value benefit percentage-wise is different. It's 9.7% in scenario 1. It's 9.65% in scenario 2. So the benefit drops by 0.05%, and if you take 0.05% of the 8.53 million, there's your $4,000.
It's always that little decimal point.
Okay.
Okay. Well, so Glenn, so the question becomes, sort of what everybody does. We're financially stressed now. And so you take, if you take the money off the table in the first year, you're making a bet that you're not going to be financially stressed for the next 13. It's the same calculation, governments make every day.
Part of me, sorry, it's Mike again. I mean, part of me feels like we have to also think about, what do we feel like we need to borrow more money? And again, this is where it's going to get complicated with all the American Rescue stuff and CARE stuff. But I mean, I think a few of us have talked, recently about, maybe we need to bond for some of these HVAC items and other items that we knew there was no way we were going to absorb it in 1 year in terms of the mill rate, so we might have to bond for it. But now I think obviously we're hoping we get as much through the CARES Act. But it would seem a little silly to me that we would issue a new bond, and at the same time that we're spreading out the benefit of the existing bond. Let's just take it all back now, so we don't have to bond a higher amount now. I guess so I kind of feel like we almost need to think about that decision here as well.
I think you're right.
Yeah, hi, this is Bob Stachin. I think I agree with I think the question becomes, if we did take the money now, what would we do with it? Is really what and if we have a strategy, then it makes sense to do it. And if the strategy is to take that money and use it for some of the projects and reduce the debt service that we would take on with any new project, then that seems to be a responsible thing. But again, it has to do with what I think we need to know what we would do with the money, and then that helps us make the decision.
Yeah, but even if it's just defraying the cost of SIP next year, we're doing something with the money, right?
Right.
Money's
if that's the best way to do it, then I agree. I think that I'm of the ilk that you would take the money up front and then reduce costs at this point. I mean, $65,000 in 2035, what is that? What is that really? And if we could find a functional, financially prudent way to use that money now, it seems like it would be appropriate. But I think we should make sure we clarify what we would want to do with that. Thank you.
This is Dave Motherway. One of the things that came up that is the middle school. We took the AC out based on the discussion that there's potentially a renovation that's going to be necessary. I guess the question that I have is can we work with the Board of Education to get them to look at that and come back with some figures as far as planning is concerned, to then roll all those things in and kind of look at this as, for all intents and for capitalizing some of this stuff into a bond and do the 1 year hit like Lynn suggested. I think both of those things make a lot of sense if the rates work.
Dave, you lost me there at the end. What you said, that the 1 year hit, Lynn, what do you mean by that?
Well, as opposed to spreading the what we started talking about, right? Which is take the hit all in 1 year, right? Take it up front.
That's what I was trying to, I guess, say as well. Like, if we're going to issue debt, I'd rather issue debt. We're thinking about $4 million in debt, for argument's sake. I'd rather issue, 3.3 million because we took 700 back right now than issue 4 million in new debt only to spread that, the benefit over.
Exactly. But I'd like to understand what the whole equation is, if possible.
We need to
Right,
know what
like-
cares.
Well, that we're not gonna know in the refinance time.
We don't have to do that. We just have to authorize to go out and do it, right? So we don't have to actually do it. So
Correct.
I mean, I think it's pretty easy to make a vote tonight to take it up front because the delta's not that much, and it also, who knows, if we keep issuing CARES funds, you may have bond rates at 0, and we can do it again in 2 years.
Right.
It does offer a safety valve.
It's a safety valve. Yeah.
You'll have that money budgeted with the budget the way it's done. If you take it up front, you'll have that money budgeted in debt service. And if some of the CARES or Recovery Act money doesn't come through to offset those SIP things that were cut, you'd be able to transfer it to cover it from debt service.
Jim, the sense of the board is to upfront load the savings,
Okay.
not just spread it equally, okay?
Very good. All right.
Hey, but
We
Jim,
don't
can you
need-
do a little sensitivity analysis and just figure out what 25 bips does to
Okay.
the, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Just figure out what happens when it moves by 25 bips and whether it's even going to be worth paying bond counsel to do it.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll tell the financial advisor tomorrow what our strategy is, and I'll say, tell us to update it with where he thinks it's going to be, and then a couple scenarios either side of that.
Yeah, we have a financial advisor.
Well, not a daily. They do the debt issuances. They have to be done by a licensed financial advisor. We can't issue debt ourselves. We don't have the in-house.
Yeah, but we don't have
expertise.
somebody advising us on cash management or anything like that, do we?
No. Different kind of financial advisor.
Jim, do you have everything you need?
I do.
All right, is there anything else that the board needs to do? I don't believe there is, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
Get a second. Thank you, Deb. Motion Glenn, second Deb. All in favor, we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Glenn, it's nice